Staff at the Whispering Pines Retirement Community knew Harold Jenkins as the harmless old janitor with advancing Alzheimer's. Residents smiled sympathetically when he mumbled in foreign languages or obsessively checked door locks. But when armed Russian operatives infiltrated the facility hunting for the Phantom, a legendary Cold War spy who had allegedly stolen Soviet nuclear secrets, no one suspected Harold. As the intruders executed their methodical search, the confused janitor's behavior suddenly changed. Using only cleaning supplies and intimate knowledge of the facility, he systematically neutralized each threat with surgical precision. The last attacker, cornered and terrified, gasped in recognition. "Prizrak, it was you all along." The Alzheimer's had been his most brilliant cover yet. Whispering Pines Retirement Community, Northern Virginia. "Present-day Mr. Jenkins. You've missed a spot there," said Nurse Wilson kindly, pointing to a perfectly clean section of floor. Harold Jenkins nodded vacantly, mumbling something unintelligible as he obediently moved his mop over the already spotless tiles. His watery blue eyes had the unfocused look that staff had come to associate with his advancing Alzheimer's. At 75, the stooped janitor was a fixture at Whispering Pines, harmless, helpful when lucid, and increasingly lost in his own mind. "Poor Harold," Nurse Wilson said to a new staff member as they walked away. "Been here almost 8 years. No family ever visits. Some days he doesn't even remember his own name." What the staff didn't notice was how Harold's vacant expression sharpened the moment they turned away. His seemingly random mopping pattern had methodically covered every potential entry and exit point on the floor. His mop water had been changed exactly 3 times, once after each wing of the building, maintaining optimal cleaning efficiency. The residents barely registered his presence. Harold was part of the background, like the beige wallpaper or the generic landscapes hanging in the corridors, invisible by virtue of being utterly uninteresting. Only Colonel Frank Garrison, a 82-year-old retired Air Force officer, occasionally studied the janitor with curious eyes. Something about the way Harold moved in his more lucid moments, economical, precise movements that didn't waste energy, reminded him of men he'd known during his military career. But even the colonel's suspicions were vague and formless. After all, who would take notice of an aging janitor with dementia? That evening, as the facility quieted for the night, Harold completed his final rounds with the same methodical care he applied to everything. He checked each exterior door, not with the confusion of a man lost in time, but with the precision of someone verifying security protocols. None of the night staff noticed how his gaze lingered on the newly hired kitchen worker, whose accent didn't quite match his claimed background. In his small room in the facility's staff housing wing, Harold sat on the edge of his bed and reached beneath the mattress, extracting a small notebook. Inside were precise, handwritten notes, not the confused scribblings of an Alzheimer's patient, but detailed observations of everyone who entered and left the facility, documented with military precision. Today's entry noted the 3rd new staff member in 2 weeks with inconsistent background details. A pattern was emerging, and Harold's seemingly addled mind was assembling the pieces with the cold efficiency that had once made him legendary in circles so classified that even their existence was denied. He carefully replaced the notebook and resumed his vacant expression, even though no one was watching. After nearly 5 decades in the espionage world, maintaining cover was as natural as breathing. The Alzheimer's diagnosis, partly genuine, partly exaggerated, was simply his final and perhaps most brilliant disguise. Something was coming. Harold could sense it with the same instinct that had kept him alive behind enemy lines for much of the Cold War. The question was whether his aging body and partially compromised mind would be sharp enough to face whatever threat was methodically infiltrating Whispering Pines. 3 days later, Harold was polishing the handrails in the East Wing when Director Evans approached with a new resident. "Mr. Jenkins, this is Dr. Ivanov. He'll be joining us at Whispering Pines." Harold nodded vaguely, his hands continuing their mechanical polishing motion. But behind his vacant smile, alarm bells were ringing. He recognized the face beneath the new resident's carefully crafted appearance. Mikhail Baranov, once a rising star in the KGB's Directorate Viv, their department for sabotage and assassination. A man who should have been long dead, according to official records. "Pleased to meet you," said Dr. Ivanov, with a slight accent and an extended hand. Harold wiped his palm on his uniform before shaking it weakly, playing his role perfectly. "Clean things," he mumbled, allowing a bit of drool to gather at the corner of his mouth. Ivanov's eyes flickered with dismissal. Exactly the reaction Harold wanted. The best disguise was one that made others look away out of discomfort or pity. That night, Harold's routine changed subtly. He spent extra time checking the locks on less used entrances and studying the facility's outdated security system. His fingers, though less nimble than in his prime, still remembered how to adjust the angle of hallway cameras to create blind spots while making the changes look like ordinary maintenance. In his room, he slid a hand beneath his simple bed frame and pressed a hidden latch. A small compartment opened, revealing items that would raise immediate questions if discovered. A Soviet-made PSM silent pistol preserved in cosmoline, 3 passports with different identities, and a small case containing specialized tools of a trade far removed from janitorial work. His hands trembled slightly, not entirely an act now, as age had taken its toll, as he cleaned the weapon for the first time in years. The familiar routine came back to him, despite the periodic gaps in his memory that had become genuinely concerning in recent years. He recognized that Baranov's appearance was no coincidence. For decades, rumors had persisted in intelligence circles about the Phantom, a deep-cover American operative who had allegedly stolen the Soviet Union's most sensitive nuclear targeting protocols in 1983. It was a mission so classified that even within the CIA, it existed only as whispered legend. The operation had been Harold's masterpiece, the culmination of 15 years spent building an identity as a mid-level Soviet bureaucrat with access to military archives. His extraction had been so clean that the Soviets weren't certain for years what had been taken, or by whom. By the time they identified the breach, Harold Jenkins had disappeared, and a janitorial position at a Virginia retirement community was the last place anyone would look for America's most accomplished spy. But now, somehow, they had found him. The question was whether they knew with certainty that Harold was their target, or if they were still hunting. Either way, the infiltration pattern was clear. 3 new staff members, and now Baranov himself, all converging on Whispering Pines within weeks. As he reassembled the pistol with muscle memory that defied his cognitive decline, Harold made his decision. Playing defense would only delay the inevitable. If Russian operatives had found him, they would eventually extract or eliminate him. His only advantage was that they still seemed unsure, still searching. It was time for the Phantom to set the terms of engagement one last time. Harold's opportunity came faster than expected. At 2:17 a.m., his self-modified door alarm, disguised as a loose hinge that squeaked, alerted him to movement in the East Wing. Moving with quiet efficiency that belied his age, he followed the shadow through darkened hallways. The intruder, Dmitri, the new orderly, was making his way to the medication storage room with purpose. Harold observed from the darkness as Dmitri bypassed the lock with professional skill and slipped inside. Harold knew what Dmitri was searching for. Standard Russian protocol would be to secure the target for interrogation before elimination, which meant sedatives or truth serum. The fact that they were taking this approach confirmed his suspicion. They weren't certain he was the Phantom. They needed confirmation. Silently, Harold retrieved his mop from the nearby cleaning closet. Not his weapon of choice, but the one that would maintain his cover if things went sideways. He waited until Dmitri emerged, a loaded syringe carefully concealed in his palm. "Bathroom?" Harold mumbled, shambling forward in his most convincing dementia patient gait. Dmitri startled, quickly concealing the syringe. "Down the hall, old man," he said dismissively, attempting to move past. As Dmitri brushed by him, Harold's transformation was instantaneous. His stooped posture straightened, his shuffling gait vanished, and with precision born from thousands of hours of training, he swung the mop handle in a controlled arc that connected precisely with Dmitri's carotid artery. The orderly staggered, momentarily stunned, but far from incapacitated. His eyes widened, with the sudden recognition that the confused old janitor was something else entirely. Prizrak? Dmitri whispered the Russian word for phantom, as he reached for a concealed weapon. He never completed the motion. Harold had already closed the distance, driving the mop handle into Dmitri's solar plexus with calculated force, enough to disable without causing noise that might alert others. As Dmitri gasped for breath, Harold relieved him of his weapon and the syringe, speaking for the first time without his addled affectation. "Who else is here?" he demanded, his voice low but clear, with the authority of someone used to having his questions answered promptly. "You're supposed to be dead," Dmitri managed, genuine shock evident in his expression. "Evidently not," Harold replied coolly. "Last chance." "How many?" When Dmitri remained silent, Harold sighed with something approaching disappointment. With methodical efficiency, he used the operative's own syringe against him, administering just enough to ensure compliance without risk of overdose. "4 of us," Dmitri slurred as the chemical took effect. "Baranov wants confirmation before extraction team arrives." Harold processed this information with the same analytical precision that had once made him legendary within the intelligence community. 4 infiltrators already in place, with an extraction team inbound. The timeline had accelerated dramatically. After securing Dmitri in a supply closet, bound with cord from his mop bucket and sedated to ensure several hours of unconsciousness, Harold moved with renewed purpose. His first priority was to secure the safety of the residents, innocent bystanders in a decades-old espionage war. He made his way to the security office, where the night guard, another recent hire he'd flagged as suspicious, was monitoring the cameras. Harold shuffled in, mumbling about being unable to sleep. "You need to return to your room, Mr. Jenkins," the guard said firmly, rising from his chair. Harold's vacant expression never changed, as he reached for the industrial cleaning spray on his cart and directed a precise stream into the guard's eyes. As the man recoiled in pain, Harold struck with the same controlled efficiency he'd displayed earlier, neutralizing the threat without lethal force. 2 down, 2 to go. And then there was Baranov himself, the most dangerous adversary of all. By 4:30 a.m., Harold had neutralized the third infiltrator, a nurse, who had been systematically searching resident rooms. Using only items from his cleaning cart, he had created a series of distractions and traps that would have impressed his former handlers at Langley. But as dawn approached, Harold faced a hard truth. His stamina wasn't what it once was. The physical toll of the night's activities had awakened genuine pain in his arthritic joints, and he found himself fighting through occasional moments of actual cognitive confusion, his cover story becoming reality. At the most inopportune times, he needed help, and there was only one person at Whispering Pines who might understand the situation without requiring lengthy explanations. Colonel Frank Garrison was awake when Harold silently entered his room, almost as if he'd been expecting the visit. "I always knew there was something off about you, Jenkins," the colonel said without preamble. No janitor checks sight lines and exit routes that carefully. Harold allowed himself a small smile. "I need your help, Colonel. The residents are in danger." Garrison studied him for a moment, then nodded sharply. "Soviet era, or more recent Russian operations?" "Cold War unfinished business," Harold replied, appreciating the colonel's quick grasp of the situation. 4 operatives inside already. Extraction team inbound. I've neutralized 3, but Baranov is still active. The colonel's eyebrows rose at the name. "Mikhail Baranov, the butcher of Prague?" Harold nodded. "The same. Currently posing as Dr. Ivanov in the East Wing." Without further questions, Colonel Garrison wheeled himself to a locked cabinet beside his bed. Using a key kept around his neck, he opened it to reveal a pristine Mem 1911 pistol. "Kept it clean all these years," the colonel said, checking the weapon with practiced hands. "Never thought I'd need it in a place like this." Together they formulated a plan. The colonel would coordinate with trusted staff to begin quietly moving residents to the facility's secure wing, ostensibly due to a gas leak in the main building. Meanwhile, Harold would confront Baranov directly. As they prepared to separate, Garrison asked the question that had clearly been on his mind. Who are you really, Jenkins? Harold considered the question. Just a janitor now, Colonel. But a long time ago, some people called me the Phantom. Recognition flashed in the Colonel's eyes. The nuclear protocols extraction. Moscow, 83. That was you? Harold neither confirmed nor denied, but his slight smile was answer enough. Let's make sure everyone stays safe, Colonel. As Harold made his way toward the east wing where Baranov was quartered, he felt a clarity of purpose that had been absent for years. The occasional cognitive fog that had genuinely plagued him seemed to have retreated in the face of imminent threat. Muscle memory and training, asserting themselves when needed most. He found Baranov in the facility's small library, calmly reading in the pre-dawn light. The Russian looked up, unsurprised. I wondered when you would find me, Harold, or should I call you by another name? Jenkins is fine, Harold replied, keeping his mop between them. Your team has been neutralized. Baranov smiled thinly. Impressive for a man of your age and condition, though I suspect the condition has been somewhat exaggerated. Why now? Harold asked, circling slowly to position himself between Baranov and the door. After all these years, new leadership, old grudges, Baranov replied with a casual shrug. The files you took in 83 have continued to haunt us. Someone very high up never forgot, never forgave. When facial recognition software identified you 3 months ago, I was sent to confirm and retrieve. Harold absorbed this information. Carelessness, perhaps a doctor's appointment in the city, caught on a security camera, had been his undoing. The residents here are innocent, Harold said firmly. Whatever our business, it doesn't involve them. I agree, Baranov replied, surprising Harold, which is why I instructed my team to use non-lethal methods. We are not the monsters your government made us out to be. A tense silence fell between them, two aging relics of a conflict most of the world had moved beyond. So what now? Harold finally asked. Baranov sighed, suddenly looking every bit his age. Now? I complete my mission if I can. But we both know that's unlikely given what you've done tonight. He studied Harold with something approaching respect. The extraction team will be more direct in their methods. When? Within the hour. 6 men, heavily armed. I don't suppose I could convince you to come quietly. It would save many lives. Harold considered the offer for a moment. Self-sacrifice had always been part of the job description, but something in Baranov's tone suggested deception. You were never going to take me alive, Harold stated rather than asked. Too many secrets. Baranov's slight smile confirmed the assessment. As I said, new leadership, old grudges. In the distance, the facility's fire alarm began to sound. Colonel Garrison's signal that the residents were secure. Time was running short. One professional courtesy, Harold said. How did you find me? Baranov hesitated, then apparently decided the information was harmless now. Your sister's funeral. Facial recognition from the church security camera. A man with Alzheimer's, who still remembers to pay respects to family. It raised flags. Harold absorbed this with a nod. One moment of humanity had compromised decades of careful anonymity. You should know, Harold said. I've alerted my former employers. A CIA rapid response team is already en route. It was a bluff, but a calculated one. Harold had no way to contact his former handlers, but Baranov couldn't know that with certainty. The Russian's expression revealed the first hint of concern. Then our time grows short indeed. The extraction team arrived with military precision at 5:43 a.m. 6 men in tactical gear, breaching the service entrance with practiced efficiency. What they didn't know was that they were entering a battlefield prepared by one of the Cold War's most ingenious operatives. The first 2 operators triggered Harold's improvised alarm system, bleach and ammonia, carefully positioned to create a caustic gas when the door was forced open. As they staggered back, disoriented, Colonel Garrison opened fire from his concealed position in the administrative office, forcing them to retreat. Meanwhile, in the library, Harold and Baranov's standoff had evolved into something more complex, a battle of wits between 2 professionals who had devoted their lives to the shadowy world of espionage. Your extraction team has encountered resistance, Harold observed calmly, as the sound of gunfire echoed from distant corridors. Baranov's expression tightened. So it would seem. You've been busy. I've had 8 years to prepare this facility for contingencies, Harold replied. Occupational hazard of the paranoid. The Russian nodded, in understanding. We are creatures of habit, you and I. Unable to truly retire, always preparing for ghosts from the past. Speaking of which, Harold said, reaching slowly into his pocket and extracting a small flash drive, I believe this is what you're really after.
Storage.
Baranov's eyes, fixed on the device, with sudden intensity.
You do.
The original files. Copies, Harold corrected. Insurance policy. The originals were turned over decades ago. For a moment, Baranov seemed to calculate his options, weighing the value of the intelligence against the deteriorating tactical situation. Before he could decide, Director Evans appeared in the doorway. His expression, a mixture of shock and confusion. Jenkins, what's happening? There are armed men in the building. The momentary distraction was all Baranov needed. In one fluid motion, he drew a concealed weapon and aimed it at the director. Harold moved with a speed that belied his years, throwing himself between Evans and Baranov. The shot that followed seemed deafening in the confined space of the library. Harold felt the impact, like a hammer blow to his shoulder, but decades of training allowed him to push through the pain. As he fell, he released the bottle of cleaning solution he'd palmed earlier, the contents spraying directly into Baranov's face. The Russian recoiled, temporarily blinded, giving Harold the opportunity to tackle him, despite his wounded shoulder. They crashed into a bookshelf, sending volumes cascading around them as they grappled for control of the weapon. Run, Harold shouted to the stunned director, who finally seemed to grasp the danger and retreated from the doorway. In the struggle that followed, Harold felt the limitations of his aging body acutely. Baranov was younger, stronger, and uninjured. Under normal circumstances, the outcome would have been inevitable. But these weren't normal circumstances. This was Whispering Pines, a facility whose every corner, weakness, and structural peculiarity Harold had memorized over 8 patient years. As Baranov gained the upper hand, forcing Harold back against the wall, his foot found the loose floorboard Harold had intentionally never reported for repair. The momentary imbalance was all Harold needed. With a precise strike to Baranov's wrist, he disarmed the Russian, following through with a series of blows that owed more to muscle memory than conscious thought. As Baranov slumped to the ground, subdued but not killed, Harold allowed himself a moment to assess the situation. The sounds of conflict from elsewhere in the facility had diminished, suggesting the extraction team was either neutralized or retreating. Colonel Garrison appeared in the doorway, his service weapon still at the ready. Building is secure, he reported with military crispness. 2 hostiles down, 3 retreated, 1 captured. Harold nodded, pressing a hand to his bleeding shoulder. Casualties? None among residents or staff. You? I'll live, Harold replied, though the pain was becoming more insistent as adrenaline faded. We need to secure Baranov and contact proper authorities. The colonel raised an eyebrow. And which authorities would those be, exactly? This doesn't seem like a matter for local police. Harold managed a pained smile. In my room, there's a phone number taped under the drawer of the nightstand. Tell them Operative Coldstar is calling in his final report. As Garrison left to make the call, Harold secured Baranov with cords from the library's window blinds. The Russian watched him with a mixture of professional respect and resignation. You know they'll never let you truly retire now, Baranov said quietly. Once they know you're still alive, still capable. Harold considered this as he tightened the bindings. Perhaps, but I think I've earned the right to negotiate terms. By the time specialized CIA personnel arrived, disguised as federal emergency response teams, Harold had already established his conditions through Colonel Garrison. He would provide a full debriefing on the incident and surrender all copies of the sensitive materials, but in return, he would maintain his cover at Whispering Pines, this time with proper security protocols and medical support for his genuinely deteriorating condition. Director Evans and the staff were given a sanitized explanation involving foreign agents targeting a former federal witness in protective custody. Most accepted this without question, though their perception of the humble janitor had been permanently altered. 1 week later, as Harold mopped the corridor outside the dining hall, his wounded shoulder still tender beneath his uniform, Colonel Garrison wheeled up beside him. The new security team is in place, the colonel informed him quietly. Disguised as maintenance contractors, they've installed additional measures throughout the facility. Harold nodded almost imperceptibly, maintaining his slightly confused expression for any observers, and the residents, safe, and largely unaware of what really happened. Though I've noticed some of them treat you differently now. Hard to unsee certain things. Harold allowed himself a small smile. A hazard of the profession. Eventually, all covers are compromised. Was it worth it? Garrison asked suddenly. All those years in the shadows. Harold paused in his mopping, genuinely considering the question. I protected people who never knew they were in danger, he said finally. Same as I did last week. That has always been enough. As the colonel wheeled away, Harold returned to his methodical cleaning pattern, his movements still precise, despite his injury. To casual observers, he remained just another elderly employee, with cognitive decline, occasionally sharp, frequently confused, ultimately harmless, just the way the Phantom preferred it. In the months that followed, residents and staff at Whispering Pines adjusted to their new normal. Security had been enhanced, though few understood why. Harold continued his janitorial duties, playing his role with the same dedication that had defined his career in espionage. Only occasionally, when younger agents from his former employers visited under various pretexts for debriefing sessions, did Harold allow glimpses of the operative he had once been. Even then, he maintained the careful balance of his cover, part genuine cognitive decline, part elaborate performance. After all, the most effective ghosts are those that people eventually convince themselves they never really saw. If this incredible story of hidden heroes among us captured your imagination, hit that subscribe button to join our community. Have you ever suspected someone in your life might have a secret past or hidden skills? Share your thoughts in the comments below. We read every single one and would love to hear your theories. Do you believe there are former spies living ordinary lives all around us? Let us know what you think. And don't forget to turn on notifications by clicking the bell icon so you never miss our daily uploads of extraordinary stories that remind us heroes often hide in plain sight.